Hello and welcome back everyone, we Weeb Online, and today I'm gonna continue the story What If Fem Orochimaru Was Obsessed with Naruto Part 8, The End. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up, and to watch more videos like this, subscribe to my channel and turn that bell notification on so you never miss an upload. Now wasting no more time, let's begin.
Orochimaru woke up to the smell of the ocean and a clear lack of warmth. She was glad that Tsunade had found a cure for morning sickness a long time ago. Otherwise, the smell of salt in the air would have made her want to run to the bathroom. She opened her eyes to confirm what she already knew. Her husband wasn't in bed. Orochi slipped on her sky blue yukata and walked out of the beach bungalow. With a quick look around, she found her husband living in a hammock between two palm trees. She walked over, and the sand under her feet was cool because it hadn't been in the sun during the middle of the day. When she got there, she saw that he was reading Jiraiya's first book, and she laughed out loud. Naruto wasn't the least bit offended. He just laughed and told her that the book was better than she thought. He also told her that he had read it several times. She asked him as she joined him in the roomy sling, "Is this the plan, Naruto-kun? To read on the beach like two normal people? That doesn't sound like the worst idea. Let's just stay here on the beach and do nothing." She looked straight into Naruto's eyes and asked, "Is that what you want?" He gave a head shake. "Part of me likes the idea, but I think I'd get bored pretty quickly. Down my adventurous spirit," he said with a sarcastic tone. An adventurous spirit. When I act up because I'm bored, no one tells me I have an adventurous spirit. You should have hired a ninja to promote you, dear. That was my mistake. But you neurotypicals are useful, so I'm glad I have so many of you around. But I'm different, right? Orochi said. "Oh baby, you're my world." But she couldn't help but roll her eyes as she said it. She was quickly pulled out of the hammock by Naruto, whose speed surprised her. She knew where he was going and felt she had to tell her husband that he was making a mistake. "I'll beat you up if you throw me into the sea." Naruto stopped and stared into her eyes with an intensity that wasn't like him. He was quiet for a few seconds before asking with a smile, "You promise? You've picked up one of Jiraiya's bad habits," he told her, laughing so hard that she shook in his arms. "No, I don't like getting attacked by angry women. Also, Hinata, I wasn't going to throw you in the water. I was going to ask if you were up for a little tour, Naruto style." "What does it mean to have Naruto style?" "From a bird's eye view," he said when they got to the shore. Naruto used his chakra to make a big clay hawk come out of the water. "Did you really hide that there just so you could show it all at once? Pretty cool, right?" he asked with a smile that could light up a room. Orochi said, "I respect your showmanship." And then he kissed him on the cheek. "Sure, I'd like a tour." "That's great, Titabeo." They chose the structure and took off. The speed at which the fake bird took off caused the water to part. Orochi wasn't drawn in by the bright colors in the sky early in the morning, nor by the sea life that was just coming up out of the water. It was the thrill and sense of freedom that came from flying. They weren't going very fast, and they weren't very high up, either. They weren't much taller than Manda. It was the feeling of not being tied down, of breaking gravity's rules even more than usual. The fact that she did it with her maelstrom made it even more fun, and she wondered if she should try to learn Bakugan after she mastered that annoying Rasengan. Shikaku told his son, "You two, come downstairs for breakfast." Shikamaru looked around and said sarcastically that he could see he was alone. Shikaku put his arms across his chest when challenged. In reality, he hadn't seen through Shikamaru's genjutsu. It was subtle and very well done. He had no reason to. The problem with 16-year-olds is that they all think they're the first 16-year-olds ever, so they think all their tricks are new and unheard of. "Sorry to break it to you, son, but you're not. And even if you were, remember I'm the Jounin commander for a reason, fuckhead. Now, come to breakfast so your mom doesn't get mad." The commander closed the door and snickered. "You just got sunned, Shika. Hahaha, have fun with that, trouble. If I remember right, you were the one who suggested we come back here," Shikamaru said as he got out of bed and went to his closet. "Well, I didn't think you'd want to come back to my suite, which I share with my brothers. Plus, hotel sex makes you feel like a whore." Shikamaru was shocked and asked, "Excuse me?" "Yes, like my on-call gigolo waiting for his mistress to call him. It's fun at first, but I worry about my respect for you. You are the most troublesome woman in the world by a long shot. I can't be more of a pain than Orachimaru, the wife of your teammate and best friend." Shika said, "Well, Naruto has to deal with her." "Oh, and I'm yours?" she asked in a way that was too sweet. Shika knew he had set a trap, but he had learned from the past that giving up or apologizing only made things worse. "Yes, to both," he said, and then a pillow hit him in the face. "Could you please put on some clothes?" "Sure, I'll take a shirt." No, because every time I lend you a shirt, Temari gets a new one, and I'm running out of shirts. Yes, and as your girlfriend, I have that right, so since we're not pretending anymore, give me a shirt. Shikamaru thought of a lot of ways to respond to the absurdity he'd just seen, but he just threw her a black t-shirt instead. He had Naruto mark his clothes so he could just call them back to him when he needed them. Oh, and Shika, don't think of tagging your clothes so you can get them back later, Shikamaru said, annoyed that his plan had been figured out. But those are my clothes. I'm going to borrow them. But you don't return them. And I won't as long as I let you touch my genitalia. See how that works? Given what you just said, I don't see how I could be the sex worker in our relationship. Be careful, Nara, I always have a fan on me. Where? Shikamaru asked in genuine surprise. He was careful last night. A girl must have her secrets, Temari said with a laugh as she finished dressing and exited the room, Shikamaru close behind. He really needed to know where that fan could be. The two arrived at the table, taking their seats, Temari greeting Shika's parents as they did. They welcomed her warmly, but Yoshino slapped Shika in the back of the head, much to his dismay. Oh, why? He asked. I thought you'd have learned to stop misusing your genjutsu skills after that last mishap, Yoshino stated. Mishap? Temari asked as she put some scrambled eggs on her plate. It was nothing, Shikamaru reassured her. And I didn't cast the genjutsu, couldn't if I wanted to. Why not slap Naruto in the back of the head when he gets back? I would if he'd ever come over, but either you don't invite him or he avoids us, Yoshino complained. Me, dear, he's avoiding me. But she does have a point. You can't just put people under illusions whenever you want. If you think I can cast a village-wide genjutsu, then you have an incredibly erroneous read on my skill set. Wait, the entire village was under a genjutsu. What did you do, Shikamaru Nara? Temari asked in confusion. Well, you want to tell her or should I? Yoshino asked. What a drag. Officially, I didn't do anything. But let's say someone crossed one of my teammates but through a moronic chain of events was spared the beheading that would normally come with such behavior. Well, that person returned to the village right around the time said teammate received some life-altering news. And given the exigencies of my teammate's nature, action was going to be taken. And it was, allegedly. There's no proof, so this is all hypothetical. Oh, tell her how Jiraiya-sama stormed onto our compound and how he brought a few dozen ANBU with him, Yoshino added, and Temari looked shocked. Not to mention, you were considering fighting them like an idiot. Shikamaru, troublesome, 4 people, covered head to toe in protective wear, work silently. The work wasn't hard, but it was best completed quickly so as to not disturb the habitat. An occasional release of smoke aided in the task. It didn't take long to acquire the raw materials nor to extract what they are really after. They had become practiced hands by this point. The 3 Aburame and the foul-mouthed Uzumaki don't remove their protective wear until they are clear from the apiary. Shino had thought about keeping a beehive for a long time. Having a teammate who could grow plants no matter the season was a huge help. Shino's apiary hadn't grown to the point where he could start making honey for sale. Instead, it was just a hobby that he shared with Teuya. Many people were surprised that she started taking care of the bees, but Shino knew that was because they didn't know her and only saw how rude she was. Even ninjas who were taught to see past the obvious often couldn't, just like his clan and his Jinchuriki teammate. Shino didn't know how to turn off critical thinking skills, so he didn't know what to do. How could you only know what you want to know? It was a frustrating puzzle. Today, the hive seemed tense, son. You should check your security measures to make sure no threats can get in, Shibai said. Shino nodded to show that he agreed. And Teuya, yeah, we're having another trivia night. Shino, do you want to come? Teuya asked. I don't know, will you cheat again? Shino could tell that his father was laughing, even though no one outside of the clan would ever know. Yes, fine. I'll raid Stump's liquor cabinet. It would be nice to have more sake from Mount Mayaboku, Iri said. I'll see. That scumbag Jiraiya likes to keep it for himself when no one is looking. Shino's parents say, we look forward to seeing you either way, and then they leave. Teuya and Shino go back to the Uzumaki manor. I will find out how he cheats. I think that's half the fun for my dad. Yeah, that makes sense. What's the other half? The alcohol, said Shino in a dry way. Yes, Aburame can really put it away. You guys should let people know how fun you all are. Many people avoid us for whatever reason, and we don't see any reason to change that. If they don't care, then we don't see why we should. Teuya rolled her eyes, but Shino was more interested in the small smile she was wearing. Are you working today? Shino replied, no. What are you trying to do? I am now. Cool, said Teuya, and she vanished in a shunshin, with Shino right behind her. Dara's eyes danced across the page. The words were flowery, but the Kazekage could understand them. Iwa only wanted to make a treaty with Konoha. It was a deal to protect each other and stop fighting between the two countries. It said nothing about Suna, and Gaara didn't have to think too hard about what might happen. There may have been border fights or an increase in the number of missions where Iwa and Suna ninja were on opposite sides. All it would take is one wrong, or from Anoki's point of view, right thing to happen to start a bigger fight. If Anoki went to war with Suna, Konoha could either support Suna or Iwa, who was also on Kumo's side. No matter what the right choice was, it would be smart to either do nothing or side with Iwa. It would make sense in the short term, but when the other two villages turned on Konoha, they would be outnumbered. Gaara could also put his people on high alert and watch as Iwa slowly chipped away at them, but this would wear out his ninja and leave them vulnerable. There were probably more options, but Gaara never thought for a second that Onoki really wanted peace. When he was done, he put down the treat request and asked Tsunade, "What are you going to do?" That's exactly what Onoki wants. This was meant to stop us from taking a preventative step or to keep us from moving while they got ready. I agree, but Onoki is too smart for his own good. That's his fatal flaw, and I say we use it, said Tsunade. How do you think we should do that? Well, for one thing, I think it's time for Konoha and Suna to take their friendship to the next level. Maybe start working together on missions in Wind Country, she asked with a sly grin. Hokage Dono, that sounds like a great idea. Well, thank you, Keisuke Dono. I think we should join forces with Kiri next. Gaara thought about the move. It would mean that all 5 of the hidden villages are linked in some way. That could calm things down or send them over the edge. He looked out the window at how different the sunny skies of Konoha were from those of Suna. He was curious about what his father would do and what he hoped for when he was alone. He had taken on Suna's harsh weather and made it part of himself because he thought it made him strong. But there had to be more. He didn't like Rasa, and even though running the village had helped him understand his father better, he couldn't forgive him for what he had done. He could have done a better job. Even though there were real problems, nothing forced the former Keisuke to scare his own son. Suna was strong now, but not because they got better at fighting or made new weapons. They got strong because they worked together. War was going nowhere. I agree, but it's risky. If Onoki and Darui are determined to attack us, this might only make them more determined and help them plan. Tsunade agreed that it was a risk, but they didn't have many other options besides calling Onoki's bluff. She and Gaara worked carefully on their proposals, hoping to convince Kiri. Once they were done, Gaara left, as he had to leave for Suna before nightfall. Now, Tsunade needed the help of the Uzumaki clan's leaders. With a little creativity with her and Jiraiya's summons, she was. One day, Tsunade. Not even 24 hours. I understand, but this is important. I need you to go to Kiri. If we can make a deal with them, Onoki might be more likely to keep his promise. Then we should go to Iwa and steal his granddaughter or just kill the old fool. All of these things could happen after our time off, said Orochi. Then you'd send us to war, he said. We are already doomed to war, but at least we can decide how it will go. Tsunade could only sigh. Orochi was right, but the last of the Senju had to look at the big picture. Even if everyone thought Onoki was lying, if she acted first, then it would be a pretense for no village to ever believe Konoha truly wants peace. She'd cut off each future Hokage at the knees. It was a risk. The world said she should just get her ninja ready and storm Iwa or Kumo. Even if you don't like it, I need you to do this for me. Fine, but we'll talk more about this when I get back, said Orochi. I'm sure we will. Now put Naruto on, because he has a part in this that he probably won't like. They can have their swords if that's what it's about. Except for the Kiba blades. I saved them. That surprised Tsunade, and she didn't try to hide it. How did you know? Why are you okay with it? Why are you keeping the Kiba blades? How'd I know? Tsunade and Jiraiya rolled their eyes. I'm smart. The reason I don't want to give them up is simple. All those swords are useless gimmicks that no real swordsman needs. They will kill a few good ninjas trying to learn how to use them. Why I'm keeping the Kiba is because of 2 things. First, because fuck Kaiga. Second, Kiri was involved in getting rid of Yuzashio, so this is compensation. Even though it is much less than what I could have asked for and gotten. No problem. You two can leave early tomorrow. With nothing else to say, Ketsuyu dispelled in both places. Tsunade decided to do something special for the couple to make up for ruining their honeymoon. What she didn't know was that her oldest friend had no intention of waiting to be made whole, and was going to take matters into her own hands. 5 days. I was told that would happen. She said, 5 days alone with you. Naruto walked up to her and took her in his arms. I know, and I'm sad, too. Orochi said, well, someone has to pay for this. Since her hands were hidden, Naruto couldn't see that she was holding something. Before Naruto could answer, the needle went into his neck, the pen injector kicked in, and everything went black. Naruto woke up some time later. He didn't know how long he'd been out, and everything still felt very hazy. Even so, he could tell that he was naked, that his wrists were tied, and that he had a huge hard O. Naruto heard Kyukyuko say, "It looks like I timed that just right." He tried to get up, but the bindings on his wrists responded the same way no matter how hard he tried. It was impressive seal work. When Orochi climbed on top of him, his body was very sensitive to touch. "What is going on here, Orochi-chan?" Naruto asked, as she stood right next to him. "Oh, this is just a little something I made in case you needed more proof that our relationship could work. I've proven I don't." "Yes, you have, but my concoction has other uses," she said. It took everything she had not to just give in. Her maelstrom was completely under her control. As he leaned into her, she gently rubbed his whiskered cheeks. "You may remember that when you showed your skill with the sub-elements, I told you that if you were older, I would have taken you right there until you begged for mercy twice." "I remember." "Then you might also remember that you were sure you'd never have to beg for anything in your life. I want to see how strong you are." "You're being very bad right now, Orochi-chan," Naruto said. Orochi kissed him back, and the feeling was almost overwhelming and intoxicating. He tried to get away, but he couldn't. When Orochi pulled away, Naruto wanted more contact. I'm sure I'm going to get in trouble, so I might as well have fun," she said with a predatory grin. Kiri, as far as Orochi was concerned, was a hole. A boring, unpleasant hole. Tsunade owed her a lot for this. If it were anyone else, she'd probably think about kidnapping their youngest relative and putting her to work in her lab. She wouldn't do it, of course. Her maelstrom could handle a lot, but that would be too much. Speaking of her maelstrom, he wasn't doing much to help. They traveled by Kamui, and he immediately went into mission mode. That was fine. He wasn't mean or anything, and it was fun to get him to break and have to quickly put on his mask of professionalism again. But it wasn't as fun as what they did last night. The problem started when their escorts showed up. Kiri ninja were usually either bloodthirsty or dead, which was fine with her. But the group sent to protect them were jumpy and cowardly, which would have been fine if they were afraid of her, but they weren't. At first, it made her laugh, and Naruto didn't know what to make of it, but he soon realized it was a sign of danger. She thought that having such people around her, even though she was perfectly able to defend herself, made him angry. He lost all sense of fun and ease as he saw multiple potential targets, not threats, but people who could be hurt by him if he had to. So, he was serious and quiet, which made her bored. Normally, she'd just say she was bored and they'd find something to do. But he was being a papa bear, so her boredom wasn't a big deal. This led her to think that Kiri was a hole. At least they were in the village proper now, and the scared people relaxed. They took the main path to the Mitsuki tower. Orochi felt like they were being paraded around like exotic animals, and since they seemed to attract the attention of every ninja nearby, she could be forgiven for thinking so. Luckily, they got there quickly, and she stood in front of the Mitsuki, who asked for an extra chair when he saw that the Uzumaki matriarch was clearly pregnant, with Naruto just standing next to her. They said, "Welcome to Kirigakure, Uzumaki Dono. And you too, Naruto-kun." Her voice had a hint of sexiness when she spoke to Naruto, which was noticed by everyone there. "Thank you for being so kind, Mitsuki-sama," Naruto said. He then left the office and waited outside for about an hour while the talks went on. When Orochi left the office, he and Naruto were taken to a guest room and left alone. Naruto made a privacy barrier in case the room was bugged. "How did the discussions go?" "Time wasted. We won't be able to agree on anything." "Oh, why?" "There is still trouble here, and some people even miss the days of isolation and bloody mist. Enough that she can't make a deal with us without putting herself in danger. It's too bad about that, and there's nothing we can do. Hyukuku, if we could get rid of the three elders who caused the most trouble and have the most political power, she'd think about it. But it couldn't look like an assassination in any way. Ninja don't just die by accident, especially not three at the same time," Naruto said with a squint. "Even if it were to happen, no one would believe it. Why on earth would she ask for this?" I wanted to see how badly Tsunade wanted to make a deal. Even briefly thinking about it would have shown that I was weak. This is something Tsunade would like to happen, but she doesn't have to do it. And if I had said yes, even if it were possible, the Mitsuki would have kept us in danger as long as she was in charge. But if she had kept flirting with you, her time as Cage would have been the shortest in history. Naruto just grunted, not really liking what the Mitsuki did. "Well, we can leave soon and have little to do with Mei Terumi," he said. "Hyukuku, good. I don't like this village. Since we got here, I've been bored." When Naruto looked down at his wife, he raised one eyebrow and said, "Really? Really? What should we do about that? I don't want there to be a world war because you aren't getting enough to do." Orochimaru thought for a while before coming up with an idea. The task the Mitsuki wanted to give us, could you do it? If so, how? When Naruto heard the question, he laughed. Yes, I could. How? That takes a little more time to explain. If you're lucky, I'm not leaving. Genjutsu is the short answer. Older ninja who have probably been through at least one shinobi world war and one civil war are likely to drink. A simple argument can turn into a fight if people are drunk, and uncontrolled ninja fighting can kill people. The best way to keep it from looking like work is to make it look like something no one would question. I understand, but I think there's more. Yes, Naruto said with a smile. So, to go back a bit, I know I said Genjutsu, but I didn't know what else to call it. What are you saying? Asked Orochi, clearly interested. I think that Genjutsu is an unfinished art, and Kurenai-sensei agrees with me. That because it is hard to use well, there isn't much theory about it, so the discipline is still in its early stages of development. Just think about it. Both the Nara and the Yamanaka use yin release techniques, and neither of them needs the chakra system to be broken or even to exist for them to work. So why does Genjutsu, which might be the most pure way to release yin, have such a limit? Orochi was now sitting up, fascinated by the argument. It made sense. There were sharing in Genjutsu that could get around that need, but she hadn't found them yet. Just because someone had a sharing and didn't mean they couldn't do the same things. That would make it harder to get rid of them. Yes, but not just illusions. I know we call them Genjutsu, but at their core, they are manipulations of the senses, usually to make someone feel something like fear, sadness, or anger. But what if you only wanted the second part and not the first? You could make 3 drunk people angry or violent without anyone thinking it was strange. That's possible. Not quite. I got better at making people angry while I was working on a plan to make people mistake their allies for enemies and turn on them. That I don't need the big illusion, and without it, the effect would be pretty weak. But if they are already drunk, they are easier to control, and since there would be no other signs of Genjutsu, no one would suspect outside interference. You know, Naruto-kun, I've been busy with other things, but I'm starting to think my rival is getting too far ahead of me. Naruto ran his hands up her thighs and rested them on her waist. You know, now that we're married and having a child, we don't have to be rivals. We might get just as much done if we work together. Colleagues, she told him in a whisper. Naruto then said, associates and the like. Hyukuku, that's fine, Naruto-kun, but I think your plan has a flaw. What is that? He said, if we always work together, I'll be seen as your equal at best, and I don't play to tie. Soon, Orochi was on her back with Naruto looking down at her. I say this with all humility, Orochi-chan, soon, being on the same level as me will mean a lot. I don't disagree, so just think of the praise I'll get when I get you to admit I'm better. Naruto smiled at her and kissed her in response. Orochi kissed him back, but they soon broke up because she sensed someone was coming, which was confirmed by a knock at the door. Another group of shinobi had brought the official answer from the Mitsuki and were there to help the couple leave the village. After they left the village, they had some time to kill, so Naruto suggested they go to Nami. It wasn't that far, and he had a bridge named after him. He noticed that Orochi did something strange when she said no, but she almost insisted he go to the small country. Naruto was about to go to a tavern or food stand when Kurama told him to go to the nearest dock. It was strange, but if Kurama wanted to see a sunset, Naruto didn't argue. He shunched into the location and started to walk to the edge but stopped. He wasn't sure what he was seeing. Sure, it was longer, but no one had a shade. But why here, out of everywhere? Did Orochi know? Naruto ignored the questions and walked to the edge of the dock, where he sat quietly next to the person who was already there. He only had to look at her once to know. His smile was so big that it probably looked fake, and if people thought he was an idiot, he wouldn't blame them or care. His friend was also smiling, but she was much smaller and had a sad look in her eyes. She briefly looked down, and a curtain of midnight blue hair fell between them, but it didn't last long. Surprisingly, and against their usual pattern, she was the first to speak. All she said was Naruto-kun, but it said a lot. Hinata, death is good for you. Hinata laughed softly as she held her close friend's arm while they sat on the dock and looked out at the ocean. She almost didn't believe he was here, and the scenery was so beautiful that she could have been forgiven for thinking this was all in her head, her mind making up the price she had to pay for her freedom. It didn't have to be him. Hanabi-chan or one of her teammates could have done it instead. She missed everyone, and sometimes she wished she could have stayed in the village and been true to herself. It was too hot in Konoha. The Hyuga were hard to deal with. She could hardly breathe, and serving Orochimaru wasn't nearly as hard as being an heiress, and the daughter of a broken man who was too proud to admit it. She needed to be freed, but the trade-off was that she had to deal with the consequences every day. She wasn't sad, quite the opposite, but she missed the people she had grown to care about, especially the lonely boy who could will himself to do the impossible. She didn't ask about his status because she saw the ring on his finger and knew what it meant. It was clear that she had won. But he didn't seem surprised to see her alive, so she must have told him about their deal, which didn't sound like Orochimaru. She couldn't say she knew a lot about the woman, though. Hinata said to Naruto-kun after her moment of thought, "I didn't think you were the type for gallows humor." He smiled at her with that blinding smile that could melt even the most stubbornly unreasonable person, which Hinata thought was most of Konoha. "I have my problems, but Hinata, you look good, lighter. Part of me thought you'd be angry. If you knew, you all would be. I can't speak for the others because their relationship to the village is so different from mine. But I understand why you want to leave. I almost did it myself several times, so how could I blame you for doing the same?" She squeezed his arm a little tighter. She wasn't looking for a way out, but his words still made her feel something. Even though they only knew each other for a short time, they seemed to get each other. Who knows what that could have been in a different life? Hinata said, "You seem happier, too," and he nodded and smiled in a silly way. "Orochi-chan and I were supposed to be on our honeymoon, but we got called away. I'm going to be a dad soon. How cool is that? I have a goddaughter, Mirai-chan. Well, Shika, Shino, and I are all godfathers, but I'm going to be the favorite. Kurenai-sensei keeps telling me not to teach her high-level techniques too soon, as if I'd have her using S-rank." Hinata wrinkled her brow because she had seen how he trained himself and knew that he wasn't the type to show restraint. Naruto laughed and rubbed the back of his head, but he couldn't say he wasn't guilty. He told Jiraiya about his travels and his life back in the village. But the most important thing, at least to Hinata, was that he was going to be Hanabi's elite trainer. "My father lets this happen?" she asked in shock. Naruto made a joke. "Unless Hanabi has another way to make money, I'm pretty sure he's doing more than just letting it happen, because I'm not cheap. Anyway, yes, he's helping Hanabi reach her goals. He's changed since he lost you, and the guilt is making him take action." "Guilt?" Hinata asked. She may not think much of Hayashi, but not so much that she wants to take away his humanity. She didn't expect him to feel bad, though. She thought it would show him he was right. "Yes, I won't say I really understand him, but I think people become so used to the status quo that any change feels like a big rebellion, especially in their children, so they try to stop it. But when you lose that child, you realize the real earth-shattering change isn't them being different from what you expect, but them being gone. The two people I've seen this in were both fathers who had lost daughters. So, after he thinks I'm dead, he can finally change. What am I supposed to do with that?" she asked angrily. "I don't know," Naruto said honestly. "Many people have tried to tell me how I should feel about the village, about the Sandaime, and about my life. They all meant well, but they could only understand my point of view so much. If how you feel doesn't make you blind to everything else, then it's really no one's business. He lied to me for most of my childhood. If I hadn't been taught by people outside of my family, I would have thought I was worthless. I'm glad Hanabi-chan won't have to go through that. But I can't forgive him for being a jerk when I needed my father." Naruto didn't say anything as he leaned in to kiss her. Hinata didn't like how the mood had changed, so she decided to change it in the subject. She found it easy because she remembered something important he told her. She asked, "Boy or girl?" "I don't know yet. I have to wait a few more weeks, and it's killing me," he said with drama. "Poor thing," said Hinata with a laugh. "Which do you like better?" "Not really, but I think if I had to choose, I'd want a girl," he said, which surprised Hinata. She said this was true. "I thought all men wanted sons so that their names and legacies would live on." Naruto said, "That seems like a lot of weight to put on a child." For a brief moment, Hinata could tell that he was somewhere else she couldn't reach. It felt wrong to ask. It was a question that could only be asked without offending close friends. She was no longer like that. "I think I'd rather let my work and actions be my legacy, and let my kids make their own, whatever that might be." "That really does sound nice, Naruto-kun." Naruto changed the subject again and asked, "How did you end up in Nami?" "Oh, well, to make a long story short, my freedom is great, but I got bored, so when I left Oto I started bounty hunting." "How'd it go?" "Profitable. But anyone below a mid-rank threat feels like I'm cheating with my Byakugan and archery skills. Fair fights are for losers anyway," Naruto said. Hinata dapped his first punch. Anyway, while I was wandering, I heard about the bridge with the most familiar name, so I went to see the people who would name a landmark after you. There were endless stories about the tiny redhead with the heart of a lion taking on Gato and his army of thugs. The bridge builder's grandson looks up to you, but the bridge builder not so much, Hinata joked. I'm sure he's still a little hurt about how close I came to killing him. You'd be surprised at how personally that affects civilians. Naruto made a joke about how it seemed like they didn't have to go through it very often. Hinata also said, "Wimps." The sound of her friend laughing warmed her heart. Tsunade told her best friend, "Stop staring at me. It's bad for the baby." She knew the woman was angry and knew why, but she had to do it, and giving her the evil eye wouldn't help. But her words had no effect, so the two women just kept staring at each other. They both knew it was no longer a sign of irritation, but a challenge between the leader of the village and a woman who was about to give birth. When Tsunade first blinked, she saw a flash of a smile. "You sent me to Kiri, where I had to waste time with that annoying brat for no reason. Do you know where I was yesterday?" Tsunade answered, "On your honeymoon. Kiri has sun, sand, waves, and a private beach. Do you know what else she has? A big group of people you'd never want to have oral sex with," asked the goddamn. The snake summoner didn't answer. Missed. And even worse, Kiri ninja. "You know how I feel about Kiri ninja, Tsunade-chan." The Hokage said it was necessary. Orachimaru laughed and said it was necessary, which surprised Tsunade because that wasn't her kind of joke. Orochimaru saw how she acted and took note of it. She said, "It's the baby's fault." Then, Orochi explained why the talks didn't work out. Tsunade agreed with her fellow Sanin's choice, because she would never let a rival village get that close to her. She couldn't have thought you'd actually take the job. Maybe she wanted to stay neutral but wanted us to say no so there wouldn't be any bad feelings. Tsunade tried to figure out. It made some sense, and if Kiri was neutral, that was better than what could have happened. Oh, that auburn-haired whore would have probably agreed to anything if I'd let her have a go at Naruto, Orochi spat. Well, maybe for the good of the village. Tsunade, don't finish that sentence. Alright. It was just a joke. We'll think the Kiri problem is solved until we hear otherwise. Where is Naruto, by the way? Nami. Why? He went to look into a bridge, said Orochi. Tsunade kept waiting for more info, but it never came. Orochi took it upon herself to keep going. I want your permission to make plans for when Iwa and Kumo betray us, she said. Tsunade asked, what kinds of things could go wrong? She didn't know why she asked the question when she already knew the answer. She might have hoped that Orochi would agree with her peace plan, which was something that not even her grandfather could do. Things can't stay the same, said Orochi. I gave his ninja the spirit of revolution. They no longer dream of a world where Konoha is defeated, but one where we don't exist. Onoki waits and plans, but even the fence-sitter can see what you refuse to accept. The age of the Hokage is coming to an end, and I won't accept it. The last 3 wars were already bloody enough, and what you're suggesting. Tsunade didn't finish her thought, but she knew her fellow Sanin understood what she meant. If the only way to end a war was to win it completely, there would only be losers. They were so weak that the smaller villages would kill them if they weren't forced to choose a side right away. Death like no ninja has ever seen before. You think you'll have a choice, but Tsunade-chan, fate isn't usually that nice. Then fate can go screw itself. I won't fight a war because of a dead man's obsession. It amazes me that I understand people better than you do. No one enters a shinobi academy without a dream of being greater than they ever thought possible. Most don't make it. They settle in the middle, but they still have a piece of divinity within them. You can't stop what's coming, no matter how much you want to or how much you hate it. You also can't stop what happens after it happens. So you're saying that foolishness and empty ambitions will lead us all to hell? Tsunade asked. It didn't feel right how small it was. A fight that doesn't happen because someone doesn't have enough, but because someone wants more. Change is natural, Tsunade-chan. We've tried to stop it for 100 years, but we've always lost. If you don't accept it, you'll be damned. If you do, who knows? But you don't think Darui and Onoki will follow the treaty, so what's the harm in being ready? I can leave you. No, I'm not sensei. But if you're doing this for Konoha, I'll know every step. Just make sure that whatever we come up with, we only go after enemy fighters. We can talk about almost anything else, but that's a must. Hyukuku, that's fine with me. The goddamn said, you have completely ruined my mood, Orochi-chan. And since that jerk got you pregnant, you can't even drink with me. Blah, don't be so mean. Tsunade-ni-chan, said Orochi in a way that showed he was a good person. Blah, Hinta didn't want to let go of their embrace. They told stories, laughed, and sat in silence for a long time. She thought the silence was too comfortable and too close for what it wasn't. It was clear that her time with Naruto was almost over. She was being selfish when she wanted more time. But Hinata had known for a long time that she was a selfish person. Selfishly, she had faked her death, given the heiress position to Hanabi, and written a long letter to Naruto. She wanted to be free, have peace of mind, and not be forgotten. She still remembered what she had written, an apology for spying on him and taking his strength without giving anything in return. Even as a lonely but determined child, he was a role model for her. He did what couldn't be done, and that made her think she could do what seemed impossible. When she had doubts about herself or about working for Orochimaru, it didn't take Naruto long to do something to make her believe again. He deserved more than her ramblings of guilt, but she thought that was the last time they would talk, so that was all she had. But luck was on her side, and now she was holding her dear friend. The kunai he gave her was another good thing that came from her greed. She knew what it meant before he said he'd be there for her if she ever needed him. Hinata wondered if Orochimaru got his start by doing the wrong thing and getting what he wanted. "Hey, are you okay?" Naruto asked, and she didn't know what to say. She loved being free, but she really missed Hanabi and her other friends. She wished life didn't take more than it gave, and she wished things could have been different. A reality in which she found a place in the village, stayed with her friends, and watched Hanabi grow. Just regretting lost time, she said. If I'd done things differently, we could have been friends much sooner. This made everyone laugh. You know, there were times when I got so frustrated with my lack of progress or how lonely I felt that I just wanted to give up. But, I don't know, I always had this feeling that someone was watching over me, maybe even pulling for me. And now that I know what I know, I'd like to think that person was you. I guess what I'm trying to say is that Shika and Shino are my best friends, but I think you are my first, even if no one else understands. Hinata laughed as she fought back tears and said, I'm fine with that, too. Jiraiya looked confused, but his fellow Sanin's words, I will kill you, didn't really scare him. Even though the man's comment was a little condescending, Karin and Teuya couldn't say anything bad about it. Jiraiya just got back to the manor, so he didn't know that Orochimaru was in a bit of a bad mood. The two Uzumaki knew there were red flags, but when she told Naruto in a short voice that he smelled like her and should go take a shower and change, they knew they had to be careful. Jiraiya didn't know any of this, but neither of them thought it would have made a difference because he didn't seem like the type to be careful. Because I'm surprised you can cook, he asked from across the island. Isn't that an overreaction? An extreme overreaction, Orochi said as she continued to thinly slice daikon for pickling. Stab you in the liver. Turn a quarter turn forward, a quarter turn back, a quarter turn forward, and pull. Then you'll be dead. Naruto would save me because I'm his godfather and he loves me. He's in the shower, and if I saw you I'd burn you. Fire suppressant seals would keep that from happening, Jiraiya said. Then I'd drag your dead body out back and kill you there, she spat as she tightened her grip on her knife. The Toad Sage said with a knowing smirk, and risk Naruto's garden. I don't think so. To Karin and Teuya's surprise, it didn't seem to bother or anger Orochi anymore as she went on. I'm going to give you to Manda. He doesn't eat people in real life. He'd do something different. I don't think so for meat this tough. Pocket dimension. I'll put you in a pocket dimension, said Orochi as she put her knife down on the cutting board and left the kitchen. The three who stayed were quiet until she was out of earshot. But Jiraiya laughed as soon as it was safe to do so. When he saw that they didn't understand, he laughed more and then told them. With Tsunade, you let her explode. It will be violent, but it will be quick. With Orochi, you give her something to churn it so she can work through how she's feeling. Either way, tiptoeing around them won't help, because neither is good at self-soothing, so they'll just stay mad. Teuya told him, you're pretty smart for an old fuck. Orochi came to her room right as Naruto came out of their bathroom with a towel around his waist. As he sat on the bed, he smiled at her. She sat next to him and took a deep breath, happy that the bad smell of her former subordinate was gone. She didn't like it when he smelled like another woman, especially that one. Overall, she liked Hinata, but she knew that the girl could get ideas in her head. Naruto said, for the record, it was a hug. Orochi looked at him in disbelief. Did she hug you the whole time you were there? He asked, laughing as he scratched the back of his head, a sign he still had. She made her eyes narrow, but just as quickly made them wider. She knows her husband well and knows that he is not easily swayed or changeable. She moved closer, and his natural warmth quickly took away the chill she felt from just getting out of the shower. She said, I'm frustrated. Today was a study in getting upset. I see what you mean, he said. We should still be on the beach, thinking about what to do with the rest of the day. That sounds good, she agreed. One day we'll have to go back. Oh crap, he yelled. I had a whole plan, but we own a small island near Moon Country, so we can go back whenever we want. It was supposed to be a surprise, but we can go back whenever we want. Even for you, Naruto-kun, that would be too expensive. It would be if I had paid for it, but the king gave it to me because I saved his life and the life of his son. I couldn't tell you which one was the bigger brat, she said. There seems to be a story here, but Naruto shook his head. Jiraiya was getting annoying about needing a break, so we went to Moon Country for a little break. I found a plot to overthrow the king. It wasn't even that complicated, it took me like an afternoon. The conspirators attacked me instead of running away, so I killed them all except for the leader. Jiraiya hit the leader with a Rasengan while he was drunk, so we got credit for both of our work. Anyway, Jiraiya wanted something, but I didn't pay attention because I was so mad. When the king asked me what I wanted, I said the island, and he let me have it as long as I didn't build a hotel on it. I don't think I'd believe that if someone else said it, Naruto said. He just shrugged. I'm sorry, Naruto-kun. Huh? He asked in a smart way. I was rude to you when you came back, she said. Oh, it's fine. Kurenai-sensei said your senses would be heightened. Who could be polite when they suddenly feel sick? Orochi was happy. The last of her irritation was leaving her. Naruto probably got up to get dressed. But when he did, she grabbed his towel and pulled him back to bed, making him fall on his back. She jumped on him quickly and put her face close to his. My problem with smelling Hinata on you, Naruto-kun, had nothing to do with having more sensitive senses, she told him. She didn't expect him to laugh, and she didn't know what he would say. I know, he said with a smile that was both amused and proud of how he had tricked her. I'll get you back, she said in a whisper, but all that did was make him smile wider. You promise? He asked in a childish way. No one was surprised when the couple didn't come down for dinner for an hour. After 4 months, start moving the civilians and Genin to the shelters quickly and quietly, Darui said. Hi, said Mabui as the Shunshin took her away. There was a lot going on in the Raikage Tower, with well-trained ninja who were almost slipping into chaos. Plans were made quickly and then thrown away. It was Spec Ops. Commander is back in the office and working hard to find the right security detail for Darui's trip. During the chaos, Darui had to act calm even though he didn't feel it. He walked through the village in his Raikage robes. One reason was to show his people that everything was fine. Second, he needed time for his ninja. Time to calm down and get ready for the trial that is coming. A third reason, to help him stick to his decision. Darui remembered why he had done this as he was greeted by a lot of people. So long. He had felt like he was not on the same page as his other soldiers and former leader. They thought I had the right idea but the wrong way to do it, but he was sure that they were both wrong. But despite all of his flaws, I knew how to make his people angry. He used their pride against them. He put together a story. He gave them more promises. They were proud warriors who had long denied winning, and they had long denied being conquerors. Hokage had complete power, but he still needed his people to agree with him. As much as Darui wanted to stop the path they were on, he knew that doing so would have hurt his support. Without Kurabi and Yujito, they had to show that they were all on the same side. Steadfast, resolute. He had to go against his own beliefs. He had to accept that he was going to lose things. He had to put his trust in Onoki, which he didn't want to do. Most of all, he had to make them think that Konoha was the reason they couldn't live, why they hadn't reached the glory that had been promised for so long. Darui wondered what the Hidden Leaf must think about Kumo's hostility toward Konoha. The Sandaime Hokage really wanted everyone to get along and work together. I didn't realize how important this was until late in life, and I would never have thought about it. Tsunade's goals were less grandiose but more realistic. They could be summed up as just leave us alone, sheesh, but the hatred ran deep. The Abi tag team had come face to face with a ninja, who let them go unharmed. One man stood above I, who had killed 20,000 ninja over the course of 3 days. The existence of Konoha made fun of Kumo, their wins, their talents, and their beautiful surroundings. Most Kumo ninja didn't like the Hidden Leaf. They told stories about a village that took care of its people too much, too soft, and it barely works like a military base. Even though they weren't really ninja, their prodigies always came to their rescue. Everyone in the hidden village knew that Konoha had too many people at the top. But Iwa and Kumo were better at what they did. Darui didn't agree or think it didn't matter, but culture couldn't be changed overnight. He heard a young voice say, Raikage-sama. He waved at the young resident as he felt his protection team gather around him. He thought for a moment about how crisp the air was and how bright the sun was. Kumo was tough, but it was also beautiful, and it was his job to keep it that way. As he came up to the front gate for the last time, dozens of Jounin and Black Ops were there. As the guards at the gate looked confused, the ninja hid, tense but in control. Darui walked by them and was happy to see their guest. It's a pleasure to have you here, Uzumaki Naruto-san, Kurabi said from the back of the Konoha Jinchuriki. Hey, 9-0 brought back the mighty 8 and missed 2, you're a fool. Darui wondered why Kurabi hadn't stepped up and stabbed the boy in the back to make things easier for everyone. The Uzumaki was wearing white pants, a white shirt, and a red obi around his waist. A white haori with long sleeves, but no weapons or armor that I can see. It was a brave but stupid choice. So, I see, Darui responded. And what has led to such an act of kindness? Godame-sama called me into her office and told me, Naruto, you have a temperament and sense of judgment that are unmatched. Go close our negotiations with Kumo and get a treaty signed. Being the loyal and obedient ninja that I am, I have come to do just that. I think you'll be surprised by how much two people can do in a room. Well, Kumo says hello, and I'd like you to come with me to my office, he said. Darui knew that Kumo's best Fuinjutsu experts would check Karabi and Yujito to make sure they didn't have any seals on them. He needed them to be ready for battle. He could not let the shinobi with red hair leave Kumo alive. She was trying to stay calm even though he was surrounded by a lot of tension. But he was failing, not being able to calm his nerves. He wasn't worried, and no one who was around as much as he was could be. No, his changing feelings would be blamed on Karabi. The man was supposed to get checked for seals and give she a clear picture of how loyal Kumo's most powerful ninja was to the village. But he left as soon as Darui left with the Uzumaki. There wasn't a ninja strong enough to catch him, so she had to get a second-hand report from Yujito. She seems to be clean, one of the village's Fuinjutsu experts said. She stopped thinking and looked at the container as she pulled on her clothes, not giving her any privacy. Yujito, what can you say to me? Both Matatabi and Juki think attacking the Uzumaki is a bad idea. If he uses the Mokuden well, I could see why. But what do you and Karabi think? She pressed. In Suna, he pinned me down with just his will. I had never felt so weak before. He's stronger than me, and Karabi likes him. So, Karabi may be in trouble, she asked. Yujito's first response was a hard stare that looked almost murderous. Killing Ai-sama did that, she said in a sharp tone. Shit just gave her a neutral look and didn't say anything about Ai's removal. He'd accepted that he had to do his part and that it was necessary, so he wouldn't argue with her about it. Accepting that he wouldn't answer, Yujito continued, I don't know what Karabi will do. We aren't in I don't know what Karabi will do situation. Yujito, she said as the ninja around him became more and more uncomfortable. He owes me. He owes. What does he owe? Yujito hissed, her fists clenched at her sides. If she wanted to talk about debts, she'd be happy to do so. Loyalty, she asked in a rhetorical way. You killed his brother, you jerk. The only reason any of you see us as more than just unstable weapons of war is because B and Ai-sama wanted it. We'll just have to trust that Karabi will do the right thing, she said, shutting down the discussion. He had neither counter-arguments nor the time to make them. How did you get here without telling border security? He flew us here in metal boxes. Flew. How? He wasn't prepared to deal with flying. I don't know, I was in a metal pod. Then, about a mile from the security gates, we landed and walked. She didn't answer, his mind desperately grasping for answers it didn't have. Kaioshiro was a proud ninja from Kumo. He worked hard to become a jounin by practicing his skills, going on missions that were often beyond his abilities, and giving himself fully to the work of being a shinobi. He wasn't a prodigy like the kids Konoha raised, neither like the Sandaime Hokage nor the copy ninja. He was also a man who had lost. Those losses linked him to the young man he was currently watching. His paternal grandparents died when Uzu was sacked, and their bodies were never found. This left his father an orphan just as he became a genin. That same man was killed by the Yellow Flash himself. Kaioshiro never forgot what a Rasengan wound looked like or the look of shock on his father's face. And lastly, his wife was killed by the son of the Yellow Flash and Uzu's legacy. The ambush that Ai-sama planned was to be her last mission. They wanted to start a family, and they wanted to see their children grow up. But they couldn't. And Kaioshiro never even got her body back, so she couldn't give her a proper burial. Now, he had to watch as the personification of every major loss he'd ever had walked through his village as if it were home. The bile in his throat and the reddening of his eyes, along with his years of practiced control, were ignored. The kunai was in his hand when he decided to shunshin over to his target. His frizzy, platinum blonde hair moved in the wind, and for the first time in months, he felt alive. He was going to get revenge. He filled his body with chakra, not caring about being in control. He wanted to blitz his target, to be the lightning his people use like no other ninjas. Quick, piercing, and strong. One strike, one kill. And from his vantage point, he vanished and reappeared right next to his target. Kaioshiro's swing was about to reach its highest point, but the Uzumaki's hand stopped it. This isn't a training ground, friend, the redhead told him. Kaioshiro ignored the boy's words because he was angry at how easily he had been stopped. He couldn't even free his arm from the boy's grip. He quickly looked to his new Hokage. The man's eyes were filled with pure disbelief. He probably wanted to ditch him, but it was too late. Because of what one broken man did, several others swooped down to attack the Uzumaki. It confused him that the boy didn't move. That was, until he didn't. With one burst of chakra, his figurative spiky mane became real, and 5 of his allies were stabbed by his chakra-laced hair. Kyoshiro didn't have time to think about how casually 5 ninja had been killed before he was hit with a backfist while his kunai was taken away. The Kumo Jounin was sailing backwards, and his eyes were watering from his broken nose as he watched Darui-sama start to do a series of hand seals. He also saw his kunai become a kodachi when the Uzumaki swung it at the Hokage. The blade didn't hit anything, but Darui-sama stopped making hand signs and gave a muffled scream. ANBU took him away, and several others tried to attack the foreign invader. Kyoshiro thought he had a concussion in addition to everything else, but for some reason, it gave him a brief moment of clarity. The ANBU tried, but even though he couldn't fully follow the fight, it was clear they weren't up to the task. The Uzumaki were destroying them. 2 of them were killed by his kodachi, which sliced through their weapons with little resistance. A third tried to sneak up from behind, but the thrown blade sank into his chest. The last 2 were killed in a short exchange of taijutsu. He was losing consciousness and didn't think he would wake up even if he did. But Kyoshiro didn't try to stop it. As a pillar of water started to circle the Uzumaki, he accepted that he had let this thing loose on his village. No matter what happened, the best thing that could happen was for him to be forgotten. But it was much more likely that people would remember him as a fool. A lifer with no talent who barely got by and couldn't keep his composure when it mattered. He shut his eyes so he wouldn't see the liquid as it spread over the area. He wasn't too surprised when he saw that it wasn't water but oil. Darui said, "Tell everyone that they can't use Suten Jutsu to put out that fire." The Uzumaki had frozen his hands almost to the point of frostbite, and if the doctors couldn't stop the Hyaten attack in time, he would lose them. He had seen the Jinchuriki make a huge sea serpent and the Katen that came after it. If someone tried to put out an oil fire with water, they'd make things worse. "We can't find him," one of his ninja told him. As he waited for the rest of the report, Darui didn't say anything. He lost his temper because the situation was urgent and his hands hurt. "Get it out," he told them. "We don't have any eyes on Uzumaki itself, but we do have a few clones disguised as other ninjas in different parts of the village." Darui looked at the man and wondered why he should care that the clones had changed. The first pair was the Shodai Hokage and Madara Uchiha, sir. The second group was the Nai and Sandame Hokage, and the third was the Yondame Hokage and Isama. "We assume the clones haven't done anything, and they are all being actively surrounded." Darui laughed. Now they are waiting for orders to attack, even though part of the village was on fire and an enemy was free. He was so close to leaving right then. "Take care of the clones, but use all available sensors to look for the real Uzumaki. Then send Kurabi and Yujiro to his location." After a moment of silence, the man said, "We don't know where Kurabi is, Hokage-sama. Find him then." "Sir, they look weak," Hashirama, the famous Uchiha, said, his voice filled with boredom. The Shodai laughed and gave a pat on the back to his friend and rival. "Don't be like that, Madara. I'm sure they'll fight bravely to defend their village, even though they look weak," said Hashirama. As more and more ninja came to surround them, the two kept arguing until they saw the Kumo ninja get ready to attack. Madara wanted to show the ninjas quickly that this kind of action was pointless, so she walked up to a group of them, grabbed one by the throat, and broke her neck before anyone else could react. The shock was over quickly as the rest of the bombs exploded on whichever of the 2 people was closest to them. Madara laughed as he took apart the Kumo fodder. No one was used to using so many of them for only 2 targets. Their reluctance to use all of their skills slowed them down, and he took advantage of that by punishing every mistake his enemies made. When their defenses were broken, bones were broken or people passed out. Those who were stupid enough to attack with weapons were killed by their own tools. One enemy tried to stab at the wrong time and got his throat cut. Madara used the arterial spray to blind several ninja who were coming at him, then stabbed each of them in a vital organ as he moved through their broken formation. When the Kumo ninja didn't want to get close to him, he started a fire to punish their fear. Their screams of pain were a good background for Kumo's last dance. Even though he wasn't as happy, Hashirama was just as cruel when he killed the enemy nin. He took out his long sword and cut through anyone who was stupid enough to get close to him. When the close-range fighting was over and they switched to long-range weapons and ninjutsu, the Shodai showed why he was the best at ninjutsu. The forest he made tore at the surface of the mountains, ripping and removing everything that would stop them from coming out. Then Hashirama vanished, having changed the battleground right away to his liking. Konoha ninja were the best at fighting in the trees, and the Mokuton wielder was the best of all of them. Even though the other ninja didn't want to follow Hashirama into the scary trees, they had no choice when Madara's fire jutsu was the only other option. They ran into the cover of the trees, and not a single one of them thought they weren't running to their deaths. The darkness of the forest and Madara's ominous laugh made them think that monsters. A man with dark skin wheezed as a warning to the people standing in front of him. Both of them didn't hear his soft condemnation, and he died from his wounds. His fellow ninjas rushed over his body as they hoped they could get rid of the changed clones. But it was hard to keep thinking that these were just copies of Uzumaki Naruto. Not when the clone of Senju Tabarama called up water waves from the air, large enough to stop the Raton users from using their laser circus jutsu. The Hiruzen Sarutobi also made it hard to believe because they moved the mud on the ground so much that it broke up the foundations of the buildings around them and caused a lot of structural damage. When the man started combining elemental attacks, the only thing that kept them from giving in to what they could see was their strong belief that both of these men were dead. But the attack, which was both physical and mental, didn't stop there. The Nidaime had started using his Edo Tensei, and now their former allies were blowing up the Nin. More and more charged forward as they fell. They were desperate to land even one blow and protect their village. Desperate to stay alive and help other people. No one would say it, but what was in their hearts was clear from the look in their eyes. Whether it was being torn apart by a water dragon or burned by earth bullets that had been set on fire, the fear and doubt were getting stronger. As more people died, the little voices in their heads got louder. It seemed like this was Kumo's last chance. If the first group was stopped because they couldn't believe they were looking at two legends, and the second group was stopped because they were looking at two of the Hokage who had been in power the longest, then the third group was stopped because they were too tired. Before them stood the person they had been told never to fight. To run away as soon as you see this man, because no amount of planning, number of people, or anything else could stop him from taking your soul. Minato Namikaze was death itself to ninja who were old enough to remember the Third Shinobi War. Not a myth like the Shodai, not someone they could brag about having slain like the Nidaime, nor a person they watched wither away like the Sandaime. Minato died defeating the Kyuubi. They had seen the Hichibi's rampages and shuddered to think what a more powerful version could do, so to them. Minato's death was just short of an act of God, and the man forced a stalemate. Fear didn't begin to describe how they felt as legs grew wobbly and brows moist. Not even telling themselves these were just clones helped, not when they saw Minato Namikaze sitting before them utterly relaxed with a tri-pronged kunai twirling in his hand. Training said to run, but this was their village. Where could they run? They had to go to war. They had to fight as there was nowhere to go. Minato Namikaze did not have a reputation for being too kind. People said that he saved I-sama and B-sama for no reason at all. They were gripped by true terror. Minato said, "Hey, your ninja look upset. You should say something." For many of them, it was the first time they had heard his voice. "These traitors. To hell with them," said I, trying to get them to stop looking at the yellow flash. The words, the tone, his body language. It was also I-sama. If they were scared of Minato, they were embarrassed to be around I, and most of them gave up on the idea that these people were just clones. Normally, I wouldn't think that was so cold, but they were going to try to kill my son, grandson, and daughter-in-law on your orders, so I had to change my mind. "I won't apologize, Minato." "What are the apologies of dead men anyway?" Minato asked. I stood up and grunted, "So, Namikaze, you're a philosopher now." "I am a wise man," he said in a sly way. "Bastard," I said, and then his face turned gloomy. "I learned a new trick on the other side, and I hope you traitorous cowards like it," he shouted as red lightning wrapped around his body. Even though he was faster, Minato still got to a ninja first and hit him in the stomach with a beach ball-sized racing gun. Standing over the man he just killed, seemingly indifferent to the violent execution, Minato spoke to the crowd. "Don't blink, Ninja-sans. This will be over in a flash," he warned, and the true carnage began. As he walked out of the R&D division, Naruto wiped the blood off of his katana. That he had to cut down so many researchers, put an end to so much accumulated knowledge, wasn't something he'd ever be proud of, but his mission parameters were clear. If Darui engaged in diplomatic talks, he'd leave without incident. If he were attacked, he would cripple the infrastructure of Kumo and leave them in no position to endure a long term as a shinobi village. When the sad man tried to stab him, he was willing to let it go, but when others joined in, he had to make a decision. The first part of his attack was already set. His clones were doing untold damage to the structures, no doubt. But it was up to him to do this. And as he pulled moisture from the air, and no doubt the abundant sanguine life essence that pooled on the floor, he performed a chain of hand signs. Dragon, snake, monkey, rat, dragon. After the ice-style Arctic tomb was finished, the temperature didn't drop so much as it flipped. The water turned into diamond hard ice, and even he had to run away. They would lose the chakra cannon and other high-tech weapons and tools they had been working on. Now that Naruto was outside the building, he used his cloaking jutsu, which was a mix of ninjutsu and genjutsu. Unseen and unheard, he made his way out of the village. As he sped for the extraction point, he came upon the clones transformed into his dad and I. There had been a massacre, and the people who were left seemed to be broken. It was cruel, but there were no kind wars. He didn't see any of the other clone pairs, but did see the wood style, advent of the world of flowering trees, and knew all primary objectives had been reached. In the blink of an eye, he was at the place where Kurabi and his team were waiting for him. They looked confused, but as he let go of his jutsu, he knew they were loyal to his Kumo counterpart. Kurabi hadn't had much trouble leaving. Even though the man was strange, he loved Ai and couldn't work for a village that would kill him. Yujiro took longer, but he came to the same conclusion in the end. Even though they were treated about as well as any other Jinchuriki had been, the fact that they were called guardians kept most of the village from getting close to them. The villagers still thought of them as weapons, but they were weapons that they liked. I gave them the human connection, and even though the man had a lot of flaws, he was at least more honest with Kurabi than the Hiruzen had been with him. Kurama told Naruto that she and Yujiro were coming with hundreds of Kumo ninja. Naruto wasn't surprised when she and Yujiro arrived with hundreds of Kumo ninja. He thought that she hadn't been able to get rid of them, so she would need a way in. Even without Kurama's ability, Naruto would swear he could feel their hatred of him. He had to question their relationship with violence. Did they think that if the villages went to war, they wouldn't lose anyone? Or would it be okay if they won anyway? You have one chance to surrender, she yelled, though none of the ninja backing him seemed inclined to it. When Naruto made the ram sign, Kurabi and his team were each wrapped in a metal sphere and sent into the sky. The Uzumaki then put his hand on his sword's handle. She, with a wave of his hand, ordered his people forward. Naruto met their charge, slowly at first but gaining speed with every step. Before the victim even knew he was there, his blade tasted blood, a clean, smooth cut that made the shinobi's head smaller. They tried to surround him. They were so sure of their methods that they treated them like religious doctrine. His hair started moving. What lives his sword didn't take, his red spikes claimed for themselves. He started showing up in random places, faster than the lightning armor, with neither a visual nor an audible warning. He was breaking up their groups and breaking them down. He couldn't help but smile as a village that was proud of its kenjutsu fell to a single ninja's better skill, speed, and strength. He wondered if, in their last moments, they had realized how stupid they had been. If they knew that ninjutsu would be his legacy, but it wasn't where his talent was, they would have known that. Early on, he had trouble with it and couldn't figure out how to make it easier for him to come up with ideas. That struggle meant when he succeeded it felt good. But nothing felt right until he grabbed a sword and gave it a clumsy swing. If he was a prodigy at ninjutsu, then he was a genius with the sword, and if they knew the secret to this, they would take it to the Pure Land. He kept going as fast as he could, dancing around their attacks. He started using his illusion art, prison of false enlightenment, on some people, making them think their allies were him. It spread discord and made people even less happy. They didn't know how to help him, and the last of Kumo's attack force was stuck in a place where they couldn't do anything. Yujiro waited patiently for her moment. She might have been a coward, but she wanted to leave without having to kill any of her old friends. She didn't hold lethal intent, but she couldn't serve alongside them, not anymore. The possible new part of her life was both scary and exciting, but it also cost her a lot. Seeing people she knew get killed so easily was no small feat. The Uzumaki hadn't even gotten blood on his all-white clothes. Matatabi had warned him that he was nothing like any other shinobi, so she kept looking and waiting until she felt the ground move. She said it was like an earthquake because she couldn't think of anything else to compare it to. But soon, black smoke shot up into the sky, and the sound of angry waves crashing against helpless rocks filled their ears. Then the heat came. Even though they were far from the source, it was still very painful. Lava. Everyone in the village could see it. The reddish-orange, blistering hot material. All fighting stopped. Naruto chuckled, again becoming the center of attention. But none attacked. He had done something to make a volcano in the village. Not even the most adept Yoten users could do that. She shook her head. With every act he proved Isama both correct and foolish. No village could accept his existence, and yet no village could do anything about it. But it was when he spoke that a new horror was introduced. Pollen is combustible, he said. Those trees have been producing enough to rival a summer in Konoha, and you have two uncontrolled sources of fire raging in your village. If my oil fire doesn't get to it, the lava will. You wanted war and you got one. I hope it was everything you wished. Yujiro felt her wrist being grabbed, the sensation of being pulled registering before the grunt of she as he was flung back by Naruto's kick. She, too, was in a pod and in the air. She didn't see the sun again until they landed. "Ooh, you're smoking. I'm telling Kurenai-sensei." Naruto threatened Shikamaru, and for a brief moment, there was a look of deep and sincere fear in his eyes before it shifted to one of annoyance. Neither he nor Shino were shocked when Naruto appeared in their tent, having gotten used to him abusing his teleportation jutsu, and the others present in the makeshift command center were wise enough to react on instinct. "Look here, you troublesome," Shika said, poking Naruto's chest. "Vexing, all-around pain in the ass," he said as he continued to poke. "If I need this to calm my nerves because my teammate was sent to a hostile village with no backup, then I will damn well have a smoke. I was concerned as well, but I simply carried it because I'm a cool guy," Shino added. "You're the very definition of class, Aburame." Naruto nodded in agreement. "And it's fine, I'm fine." There was no need to worry, Shika. "So, you were able to discuss terms with Darui?" the Nora asked. Naruto shook his head. "We didn't even make it to his office before they tried to kill me. Sad thing was, he hadn't ordered it, but if they were willing to knife me in front of their raikage absent his orders, he didn't have enough control over his people for Option A to work." Shino asked, "How did Option B work out?" "If they were given the chance, I'd be amazed if Kumo could recover inside a decade. Massive structural damage and numerous fatalities. It looked like the epicenter of a cataclysm," Naruto explained. "When the pollen from his Mokyuten jutsu was finally ignited, the explosions rivaled one of his Rasen shurikens. After that, I dropped Karabi and company in Iron Country, did a quick change of clothes, and came here. How did you guys fare?" "We're about 2 miles outside of Iwa. The joint effort with Suna, Odo, and Iron Country paid off. We couldn't catch the village proper off guard, but their preparations have been hasty. Maybe if you'd been here and flexed those metal arms," Shika said, calling attention to Naruto's cotton armor under his t-shirt and red flak vest, "they'd have surrendered. Or fallen madly in love," Shino inserted. "Aburame with the dagger," Shika finished as Naruto rolled his eyes. "I ever tell you two I hate you both?" Shika said, "All the time." Shino said, "I'm beginning to doubt that you'll name your son after me." Shino, "That was never an option," Naruto said in a dry tone. "It ought to be." Naruto broke at Shino's equally deadpan response. First, it was a chuckle, but soon bloomed into riotous laughter, hard enough to make his eyes water. He had to have it. No matter how necessary his actions were or what they did to bring it on themselves, it wasn't easy for him to be the cause of so much death and destruction. But he'd never do less so that his friends, who were his brothers in every way that matters, would have to do more. Gaara said as he walked into the tent with Jiraiya and Guren, "I'm glad someone is happy, given where we are." Naruto said, "Keisuke-sama," and he nodded his head along with it. "Aburame-san, Nara-san, if you could excuse us," Gaara said, and the two departed, Shikamaru giving Naruto's shoulder a quick squeeze as he did. "Kumo?" he asked. "There were a lot of cloud ninjas, but only one very brave shinobi. They had no chance." Who, is that right?" Jiraiya asked. Naruto nodded before becoming serious. "Their infrastructure is next to non-existent, and they've lost mostly Jounin and experienced Chunin. Even if half their forces were out of the village for missions, they have limited housing, food, and water. They couldn't survive a siege nor another direct assault. Then I'll confer with Tsunade-sama, but we'll likely starve them out moving forward. Once they relent. Kumo's days as a hidden village are over," Gaara informed him. "But that's a different topic. Are you ready to go to the village?" "Are we all set?" Naruto asked. "Odo's deep cover agents have all reported back, so we're ready for whatever Onoki chooses," Guren said, acting more like an extension of his wife's will than a village leader. He didn't pity what was in store for the rock ninja, not after Onoki planned to send Han and Roshi to kill his pregnant wife. When Hiruzen admitted that he had been asked to sneak the two Jinchuriki into the village, he told Naruto that he did it because he thought she was up to her old tricks. Naruto wanted to kill the old fool and show Iwa his Jinten, the Rasen Shuriken. Instead, he got to see the man's horrified face when Tsunade told him she knew what Orochi had been working on and had cleared each step. The poison his former teammates slipped him was a kindness he hadn't deserved. But there could be no hints of internal dissension, not when they were preparing for war. After she took care of the old man, Tsunade was filled with a quiet anger and no longer felt sad about the coming battles. Getting Iron Country to ally with Konoha and Suna by promising them new recruits and territory was a masterstroke. Leaning on Naruto's reputation hadn't hurt matters either. The map, the state of the shinobi world, was going to dramatically alter after today. "You're mad if you think I'll accept this," Onoki spat, his ire attempting to seduce him into a hasty act of ordering the 4 people in front of him murdered. Even with enemies at their gates, they were Iwa, the Rock, and wouldn't be dictated to. As his advisors looked over the paper, he glared at the people sitting across from him. To stop an attack, Onoki would have to agree to this stupid idea of a new federation between the hidden villages and samurai. Iwa would not be a full member for 10 years as punishment for plotting to break a treaty that was already in place. A decade in thrall to Konoha and Suna, managing the number of ninja, selecting students to be trained outside the village. They would have final say over all major decisions regarding Iwa. Here Kuro-chan would be a cage in name only. This way keeps you a working hidden village, Onoki Dono. Kumo chose war and was brought to their knees a mere few hours ago, Gaara explained. Onoki said, "No, there's no way you could have done this in 2 places. You're right, Naruto did it himself. He'd have a fellow Jinchuriki, a Sannin, and an army at his back this time. And a fuck ton of motivation," Naruto added under his breath, but all heard. "You expect us to believe that one person, not even a Jinchuriki, could take down an entire hidden village," Kuretsuchi argued. Jiraiya silently thought 2 of his previous students could. Nagato had the raw power, and Minato the technical proficiency. Even though he'd need to plan it well, he could still do it. So why this girl wanted to see what a mix of both could do was beyond him. "Believe this," Gaara cut her off. "There is a standing army at your gates. Even if you manage to survive, thousands of lives will be lost, and we have more ninja and samurai to throw at you." It was a fair point, but Onoki had no desire to bend the knee to another. It would be difficult, but they'd need to start building strength in secret. If Kumo had fallen, maybe entice some of their ninja and train a force in secret while he planted seeds of internal division. Maybe even rally a number of smaller hidden villages. It wouldn't take much to make them afraid of Konoha's power grab. He could make them believe the alleged peace seekers really wanted to remove existing governing structures, so all were a part of Konoha. Onoki's granddaughter was surprised when he said, "We'll join." She wasn't ready to lead yet, and her reaction showed him that. He'd let his advisors deal with the logistics of it all. He needed to see how everything fit together. Gaara said, "I'm glad, Onoki Dono. I really am. However, given your penchant for double-crossing, we've taken measures to ensure your cooperation." "Durin, if you would," Gaara requested, and a quick ram sign later, the village and even the very room were filled with a purple mist. "What?" Onoki yelled. He wanted to say more, but an extended coughing fit prevented it. It took mere moments for the mist to clear the room. It wouldn't take long for it to leave the village, but the job had been done. Naruto smiled. His wife had turned the same poisonous flower that almost killed him on Ishval into a full-fledged weapon. That she managed to make it react to chakra capacity meant most civilians and academy students would be left unharmed. "The condition you've been inflicted with has a 10-year treatment plan. You try to betray us, we cut off treatment. You try to replicate the treatment and we invade. Either this is the last war between the hidden villages or you provoke it and Iwa is lost to history." Onoki glared at them. He didn't like being tricked, but he had crossed the snake Sannin, and no matter how sneaky he thought he was, she had turned it into an art. While most of the invading force stayed just outside of Iwa, Naruto got to return home. He needed it. The weight of the day was starting to get to him as he fully processed the memories of the clones and saw the silent horror in the faces of the slain. In each pair, there was a point when the ninja wanted to quit or flee but couldn't bring themselves to do it, so they died in waves. Naruto would always be a monster to those who made it out alive. That very fear marred his childhood, and he'd hoped to escape it as an adult, but he just relocated it. It turned something in him bitter to think much of the village would praise him when they feared that very power when he had an infinitesimally small fraction of it. When he opened his door, his sensei was already there, and they hugged right away. The amount of comfort of the simple gesture was immeasurable, and not for the first time he was thankful he was placed on her team. The wall he'd built around the toll of the day crumbled, and Naruto shook in Kurenai's arms. He laughed when he heard her murmur something about her problem child. They moved to the couch and Naruto ran down the events of the day, first informing her that Shino and Shika were fine. Kurenai didn't stay long, observing that her student looked exhausted and he was too tired to disagree. Once she departed, Naruto dragged himself upstairs but had to stop when he reached his son's room. Orochi-chan was sleeping in her rocking chair and footstool, which Naruto had made for her. She had both hands resting on her belly and Naruto smiled at the scene. She'd been spending more time in the room getting it organized and arranged. Tsunade Obachan called it nesting, and he thought that whatever she was working on that day used up all of her energy. Naruto made his way to his bedroom in a quiet, sneaky way. He took off his clothes and took a shower. He needed a ritual to wash away the day's events. Once he was dry, he went straight to bed and fell asleep as soon as his head hit the pillow. Orochimaru swayed toward her bed, moving with an elegance befitting a decades-long kunoichi. Even in her current state, she demanded as much control over her body as she could, though she'd be the first to admit it was no small task. There were several changes she'd expected while being pregnant, but actually experiencing them was something altogether different. She hadn't become more talkative, but she seemed to feel more, both in terms of how often and how deeply she felt things. She almost cried when Naruto-kun read Mirai-chan a silly story. What did she care about a tree that gave too much? And as she looked upon him, no one had managed to make her feel more than her husband. In that way, his name was fitting. She knew she could be obsessed with things, but she would move on once she solved them, beat them, or got bored of them. And yet, she couldn't imagine doing so with him. It wasn't about the new and the different, even though the fact that he was always coming up with new ideas was attractive. She just wanted him, to feel his body heat at night, to hear his laugh, to share the quiet moments meant for only them, for that smile he had just for her, and for all the things he did for her, for all the emotions he could stir in her. She wanted to do the same. Once, during idle conversation, she mentioned as much to Koharu and Tsunade. Both women gave her knowing looks and smug smiles, but they didn't say anything until she asked them to explain. "That's love," Orochi-chan, Koharu said. And then they moved on to other things. So, she loved him, but she hadn't told him yet. Even though she wanted to, she didn't want to do it the same way he did when he asked her to marry him. Besides, he'd been so tense these past months. He's tried to hide it from her, but she could tell. He'd been training more intensely. He didn't sleep through the night. She found him and his two teammates with their heads together quite often, as if planning something. It was easy to forget that on the day he was born he'd lost almost everything, and she could see the resolve in not allowing that fate to befall his child. She never offered him false promises. She was in a limited position to guarantee the safety of their child. But she could put him in trouble. She needed things to keep him in the present, like birthing classes, late-night runs to satisfy cravings she may or may not have had, and pushing the limits of his mokyuden by making him make several different types of cribs. And it helped, she could tell. It wasn't her favorite way, though. She should have been on the battlefield with him, killing the people who were trying to hurt their child. At last, it was not to be. But next time, she promised, she'd show her husband a thing or two about wide-scale violence and mayhem. As she got into bed, she could feel him get up and get ready to check on her. "SHH, go back to sleep, everything's fine," she said as he readjusted to spoon her, his hand lightly on her belly. She smiled, showing that everything was fine. She was happy all the way through. "The big day. My water broke," she said, and Naruto had no idea that just 3 words could make him feel so scared. They had her go bag ready and a plan, but he was having the hardest time remembering what it was. It didn't take long for her to describe the sound 7 or 8. At this point, Naruto couldn't remember which one because it was a small miracle that he hadn't killed half of his wife's so-called elite bodyguards for being weak and unable to protect her. Jiraiya said he'd been overreacting when he tested them. Naruto said that they got off easy because they only had to stay in the hospital for 1 night. The two never agreed on what to do, and Naruto didn't care to keep track. Shizune was waiting for them when they got to the hospital, and as soon as she was settled, they wheeled her away. Teammates' test came up at some point, but Naruto couldn't remember much about it or how long he'd been there. Suigetsu made a joke about walking a hole in the floor. Naruto made lightning streaks across his body, and after that, Suigetsu didn't say anything, even though he couldn't stop Anko from talking. Oh, there were a lot of tools and methods, but she was in a protected class and used it to her advantage all the time. "Don't stress, Naru Papa," she'd say and cause all present to snicker. Because of his clan status, Teuya was much more blunt. "Sit the fuck down, Stump," she demanded. But he couldn't. He was messed up. He had too much energy, which made it hard to pay attention. It was like when he didn't have control over his chakra, just too busy all the time. Kakashi was drugged in by Asuma, the bearded jounin, complaining about the headaches planned to arrive late. Jiraiya said that Kushina would kill him if he was late to the birth of her grandchild, and Kakashi could see that he was scared. After meeting his mom, he didn't understand why people were so scared of her. She seemed like the nicest person in the world. He thinks they were just overstating things. Naruto sensed Obito somewhere outside of the hospital. He smiled. The two had an unusual dynamic, but he appreciated the man being there. Tsunade walked into the waiting room and escorted him to the birthing suite. She asked some questions and he must have answered them, but he wouldn't be able to repeat either side of the conversation if ever asked about it. Orochi-chan looked calm when he walked into the room, but there was a stainless steel tray built into the wall. He moved over to her and held her hand. She said calmly, "People shouldn't be so happy when I'm in this much pain." But he could see murder in her eyes. "I agree," Naruto said to make her feel better. "It's rude. Yes, when it's her turn, we'll see how she likes it." tell me about her, and I'll take care of it, Naruto said, lying through his teeth. She answered, and he hoped that was enough but had a backup just in case. Naruto took a cup out of a scroll that had been kept cold. He asked, "Ice chip?" And she said yes. At first, she was glad to feel even a little relief from the coolness. The next was surprise as she looked at her husband. "Yuzu flavored?" she asked, and he nodded. Naruto wouldn't ever know how much he helped, but he felt like an idiot as he coached Orochi-chan through her pregnancy. She, Shizune, and the baby were doing the work. He was just breathing like an idiot and feeding her ice chips. If he didn't have chakra and she didn't, he would have broken his hand. While they heard the cry after Shizune commanded Orochi to her final push. The nurses took the baby off somewhere and Orochi-chan looked like she'd been at war and could use a rest. The two remained silent as they waited for the return of their son, but there was another present who felt the need to offer his commentary. "Your kid wasn't nearly as loud as you," Kurama said. Naruto replied, "Well, Kurama-nichan was mean to me when I was a baby, and I was just a kid. He did this because he knew it would make the fox nervous." "Shut up, don't call me that," the Biju ordered, but Naruto could tell his real yelling from his performative one. The row was cut short as a freshly cleaned Uzumaki heir was returned to Oro-chan. Holding their child in her arms, Naruto almost felt overwhelmed. He gave her a soft kiss on the cheek and said thank you in a whisper. He didn't say why, because the list was too long for someone who had changed his life more than once. Again, they were quiet as Naruto looked at his son's face. A tuft of red hair made him pump his fist internally. Almond eyes like his mom, her complexion, with 2 whisker marks on each cheek. When he blinked, Naruto saw that his eyes were yellow. He smiled at that. It seemed like his son would be more like his mother, just like Naruto. He thought that things could be worse. So deep in thought he almost didn't hear Orochi-chan speak. "Mitsuki," she said. Naruto hummed and said, "I like it. It seems to fit. Would you like to hold your son?" she asked, and he nodded and then carefully took hold, supporting the babe's head and little body. Once he was safe, he gently rocked him. "You know, son, there are going to be a lot of people who expect a lot of things from you. Ignore them. I don't care if you want to be a baker or a librarian or a mason. Whatever choices you make, whichever path you choose, I'll always have your back. And if you should decide you want to become a great man, I'll do everything in my power to show you how. Just don't forget to be a good one along the way. And that, son, is a promise of a lifetime." "Did you have anything to add, Orochi-chan?" "Just one thing," she started. The strong wood headboard was held by delicate fingers. She used the leverage well because she could tell he was close by the way his hands were grabbing her hips. As he let out a short sigh of happiness, she sped up. This was a great way to end a great day. She had been doing nothing for a long time, but today she was able to go back to the field, and it was just as exciting as she remembered. After her husband took control of them, a group of Kumo ninja ran away. For 2 years, they stayed underground and only came out occasionally, but they never went up against any ninja from the newly formed federation. That didn't stop her Odo ninja from capturing a few teams or from getting as much information as she could from them. It took her a while to figure out that Darui was in charge, and it took her even longer to figure out that Zetsu was actually in charge of him, since the entity had merged with the former Raikage while he was still weak from the explosion. Her information told her that they were leaving the continent on a huge ship, so Tsunade told her and Naruto to kill them. It was a terrible mess. How she played with them, scared them more than they had ever been scared before, and broke so many of their spirits. And Naruto-kun, her son, was no slouch either. He killed everyone who got in his way. When they got to Darui, Zetsu, the cocky thing, was sure he would make it through the fight, but Naruto Jinten, Kun's Rasen Shuriken killed both the thing and Darui. She was so happy about what had happened that day that she didn't waste any time putting her husband to bed. Mitsuki-kun was sleeping when they got back, even though they had set up seals to make sure they wouldn't wake him up. It was better that way, because she knew that what she had planned would keep them up all night. But the intense focus on the present took away all worries about plans for the future or accomplishments from the past. She could feel him tense up, and the tightening caused by her own orgasm was too much for her husband. Once rhythmic strokes became random, and he wrapped his arms around her and pressed her against his strong chest as his eyes tightly shut. Then she put her head in the crook of his neck and stopped moving. The only sound was her heavy breathing. "So," he began, still trying to keep his breath under control, "you really missed the field." She laughed, and he did too. She moved back to face him and told him, "Research is fun, but nothing beats real combat." He said, "MMHM. However, you didn't have much trouble with them." "Hyukuku," she laughed as she got closer and whispered, "When it comes to pleasure, I get very creative. This kind of creativity should be praised. We might be able to go on more missions together." Naruto said this in an upbeat way. The eyes of Orochi got softer. Since he got rid of Kumo, he had been given more and more solo S-rank missions. They knew why, but her husband was an extrovert and couldn't handle being alone for long periods of time. He hated being away from her and Mitsuki, too. Part of her wished she could give in to his wish, but she knew she couldn't. He knew this from the way she shook her head. I know. We need you here because our infrastructure is changing so quickly. That's true. But tonight won't happen again for a while for another reason, she said. He asked, what is it? She could see that he was trying to figure out why, but couldn't come up with a good answer. It goes against the rules. After the first 20 weeks, they don't let Kunoichi out on the field. She had to try not to smile when he finally got what she meant. His smile made her feel lighter. Really? Where are we? About 13 weeks, she said. Then, as she laughed, she found herself on her back at the other end of the bed while her husband kissed her over and over again. He asked, you know I love you, right? She replied, and I you. He gave her a deep kiss, and she could feel his desire for her grow. She changed her mind and let him in. He moved more slowly, but with purpose. With each stroke, the stimulation wore off. She had never put much stock in tenderness, but like so much else in her life, she just hadn't met the right person. It would be hours before the two were done celebrating. They stopped just before a small person who needed a drink could come and bother them. Before the boy could notice, Naruto was already dressed and lifting Mitsuki up. As they walked down the hallway, Mitsuki-kun told his father about his adventures with Shuri, his assigned panther familiar, and Yama. Orochi smiled as he heard them talk. She gave in and went to sleep with a smile on her face. A few months later, Ruko Uzumaki was born, letting everyone know that she existed. She looks more like her dad, with a rounder face and blue eyes. At first, everyone thought she would have her mother's black hair, but as it grew out, it began to look like Uzumaki red. She was more outgoing than Mitsuki, which was both good and bad, and she and her mother often butted heads. She was born after Shikamaru's only child, Shikadai, and before Shino's first of 4, Toga. The three were raised in a community and were almost as close as their fathers had been. They often spent the night at one of their compounds or with Kurenai-sensei. She stopped at one, just like Shika and Temari. Mirai was a cheerful but determined girl who was good at jinjutsu and trench knives. Even as their families grew, her godfathers, older brothers always made time for her. They seemed to honor Kurini's request that they not teach her any advanced skills, but Shikamaru taught her how to subtly manipulate people with words and Shino taught her how to get rid of evidence. As a childish way to get back at her, Naruto built her a 2-story treehouse with electricity and plumbing. Anything he taught her would have been obvious. Kurenai went crazy, especially since he had been able to hide it in her backyard for a week before he told her. She made him in charge of all repairs and renovations, and she laughed when he had to do one for Mitsuki, and then for Shikadai and Toga, until she found out that each one had a defense, which was a long-range water cannon. All the kids liked them, but Kurenai thought she had gotten stuck with a group of idiots instead of geniuses. Mirai and Mitsuki quickly became the best of friends. They were in the same class at the academy and were put on the same genin squad with Naruto's only official student, Hanabi, as their teacher. They even both became jounin in the same year. At the age of 21, Naruto made his own truth-seeking orb, unlocked Ashura's gift when he was 23 and became Hokage when he was 24. He was the first Hokage whose whole rule went along with the Federation of Shinobi Villages. It was hard work that wore people out. The village leaders were supposed to meet as equals, but they often gave Naruto the upper hand out of fear, respect, and love. He counted on Gaara to tell him things that no one else would. During his 15-year rule, Konoha saw technological progress, safety, and prosperity like it had never seen before in its history, even though Naruto would be the first to give credit to his wife, who is widely known to be the smartest person on the continent. From high-speed travel between countries to experimenting with flying, she was in a period of innovation that was better than her best with Team 7. Naruto's own reforms, like letting the village academies accept ninja from any Federation village and getting them to do the same, were a slow success. But it was the only thing that got people to connect across borders and see that they had more in common than what made them different. He also lowered the age to graduate from high school from 18 to 16, and he helped set up a tax system so that people no longer had to pay for missions. Ninjas really helped and protected people, and money was no longer a problem when it came to getting help and justice. At age 39, Naruto retired, which made the Federation very sad and worried. Konohamaru had earned a good name for himself and was probably the most powerful ninja of his time. But it wasn't the once strange person who had won. He wasn't the strong-willed boy who grew up to be the man who could do anything. He wasn't Uzumaki Naruto, and even though he didn't mean for his farewell speech to make that clear, that's what it did. Naruto's last words as Hokage were about being stuck in one place, how it was at odds with progress and old ways. Our roots were in that tradition, but we were always meant to grow past it. Answer new questions if you want to try new things. He mentioned grace, about how it wasn't a way to stop being ambitious, but rather a way to direct it. That he used to want power for its own sake and because he needed to be in charge, but that he only felt truly free when he made bonds. The last thing he said was about the future, how it was everyone's job to get ready for the trials that were coming, and how the Hokage were supposed to be like their villages, a model of what everyone should be like. He ended by saying that he believed in all of them, that his work would be a footnote for what would come next, and that he was excited to see what would happen. People cheered for him and wished him luck as they got ready for an uncertain future. A few days later, Orachimaru quit her job, and the couple left the village a week after that. No one knew where they went, but a story said that if you looked up at night and saw a dancing golden light in the distance, it was two lovers moving across the stars.
So this was the end of the series. I hope you enjoyed it. To watch more series like this, subscribe to my channel. Till then, we weeb offline.